Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to this episode of Wise Human. Today I have with me Jamie Pecina. I met her at an event through Detroit Girls Club. Is that what it's called? Detroit Girls Club, right?
Detroit Girl Squad. Yes.
Squad. I knew
Yes.
something was off. Okay. Detroit Girls
Close.
Squad. Met at a park and we were going for a hike. And after we were just chatting, and I mentioned that I started this podcast, and she's like, I want to be on. I have something I want to talk about. And I said, okay, let's do it. So, welcome, Jamie.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yay. I'm so happy that it's happening.
I know.
And I truly don't think that they're coincidences. I think like everything happens for a reason. Like we met there for a reason.
Yeah. I strongly believe that. I think you meet people when you're supposed to meet them. And I think that rings true throughout my whole entire life. So I'm glad I met you. That was a really great day too.
It was, I know. We need to do that again.
Yes, I agree.
So let's just dive right in. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, I don't know. I guess there's a little bit of everything. I guess you could talk about the blog, the business, how that all kind of came about. Whatever, I guess, feels right. So I guess we could talk about, where I was born and raised. I think that's kind of a big and huge part of who I am. So I was born and raised in California or Los Angeles area. So more specifically, Torrance, which is Southern California. First generation Filipino American. And I had an amazing upbringing, amazing supportive parents. Obviously, being Asian, I think it kind of goes, especially first generation, it kind of goes hand in hand. Grades were very much stressed. And I hate to say it, but, there is that kind of underlying, what are you doing with your life at like a very young age? And it's like, are you going to be a nurse? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be, they always want you to parlay in some kind of medical or engineering or, numbers or whatever the case may be. And that did not happen because I am now currently an interior designer. So very, very different. But yeah, I'm very appreciative of my parents, and they've always been crazy supportive, regardless of, I guess, what I ended up wanting to do. And I think they had an inkling, and I think they knew I was not going to be what they probably hoped I would be. But I think they're glad I'm happy, and I think that's any parent's biggest takeaway, is that their child's happy. So yeah.
So they had lots of time to prepare themselves for the moment that you're like, I'm not going to be a nurse or an engineer.
Yeah, and I never really entertained it because I just didn't like science. Just wasn't my thing. I loved creative writing. I loved dancing. I loved art classes. And I was just excelling in a bunch of things that was definitely, what is it, right brain or left brain?
I would be left brain.
That left
So you're
brain.
more right brained. Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah. So, I think they kind of were just like, she'll figure it out. And, I was just like, well, I want to go to art school. So that's what ended up happening. So I went to school in San Francisco. So that was pretty amazing. I actually moved there sight unseen, but I mean, it's San Francisco. So in my head, I was like, full house. It's amazing. It'll be great.
Right.
And I've seen Mrs. Doubtfire. It'll be fine. But it was everything I'd hoped for and so much more. Made some of my best friends out there. It was just such a fun city to be in. And I think being in interior design, it was just so inspiring. The food scene, the people, the eclecticness, it walking around everywhere, taking the bus, taking the train. It was so different than my life back, growing up in Los Angeles. And I still strongly believe it's probably some of the best 4 years of my life. And I know it's so cliche to say when it comes to college, but it truly, truly was. And so did that. And by happenstance, we were just kind of briefly talking about it, but I met my then boyfriend, now husband. He was actually going to school out there, was going to Berkeley, kind of through series of events, ended up meeting him through a friend, and that's what kind of brought me out here to Michigan. He graduated and got a job out here at Ford, and I was like, sure, Michigan, yeah, like winter, like sure, I'll do it. So jumped right in. There's a theme here if you can't tell. Apparently I don't say no to moving or very much here, but you know, it's kind of been my mantra, I guess you would say, in life, is just kind of follow your heart and follow your gut. And you know, I've been here now for 8 years. 8 years. I still feel like a California girl if you talk to anyone. Still very, very much a Southern California girl. But yeah, so that's kind of where life has taken me. And I'm thankfully still very much practicing interior design, which is always kind of like, I always pat myself on the back for that one, because I know, you know, more often than not, some people graduate with a degree and they end up doing something completely different or parlaying into something else. And I've been really adamant, I think, about like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to, for lack of better words, balls to the wall, just go for it and do it. And, you know, it hasn't failed me yet.
Yeah, I think there's a lot
Knock
of
on
power
wood.
in that. You gotta like push into it. Side note, I have a psych degree. I
Yes.
don't use it. So I'm like one of those statistics.
And that's
Uh,
okay, right? Because it's like,
it
you know,
is, it
I
is.
did it and I finished something. And I think sometimes that's what college is to some degree. Like, I look back at it and it's like, really, like, what do you know at 18? Like, you know, like, what do you
Right.
really, like,
You
you
think you
can't
know
hold me.
everything.
Exactly. You think you know everything, but you really know nothing. And then you get there and it's like, why am I studying this? Like, it sounded cool on paper, but whatever. I think it's just the act of finishing something because it's so imparted on you. You know, like, you know, talk to your guidance counselor and figure out they always want you to go to 4-year college. And I guess the
Yeah.
way I see it is like, you know, had I known any better, I probably would have done what my husband did and went to a junior college, did all my generals there, and then really truly in those couple of years figured out what I was really interested in and saved the money and then gone to a 4-year and probably would have gotten into half the college as I applied to. Because they say you have a higher chance of making a transfer. I don't know if that's still true,
Oh,
but
interesting.
they say sometimes you're better off doing that and then going in as a transfer, especially if you didn't do good in high school and you didn't have the grades. Sometimes people just do better in junior college and then kind of get in. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
so there you go, kids. There's your tip of the day. Don't sign those student loan documents.
Oh gosh, oh gosh. Those are horrible.
I
I
know.
I yeah. Oh, I could go on a whole tangent here,
I mean, that's a whole other
but I
podcast,
will try
right?
not to. I'm just gonna wrap it back in. I have
Yeah.
so much to say about that. Anyways, okay. So did you like, was it expected of you to go to college, or like did you want to go to college?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both. Well, I have an older sister.
Mhm.
Her and I are extremely, extremely close. She's about 6.5, 7 years older than me, but she ended up doing the junior college thing, but she ended up working and she was doing so good at her job and just moving up and making good money that for her, it was just like, you know what? I'm not going to go to college. Like, I'm not going to spend the money and go to college. And given she has a pretty great job now and she's doing really good. Right. And, um, but she always told me, she was like, God, if I could do it all over, I would have gone to college for the experience. And there
Mm.
is something to be said about that. And so because of, you know, her, and I think my parents obviously really wanted me to go to college. At that rate, they knew I was more artsy. So it's like, I don't know what this girl's going to do. So even if we send her off to college, maybe that's really great. Like, whatever. I think as long as she's doing something, right? Um, so, you know, I think for myself, I really wanted to go to college. I think my sister really pushed me to go to college. And then my parents were just like, great, she wants to go to college. So it was, I'm the youngest, right? So I think at that rate, my parents are just like, we
You
were
have
hard
way
enough
more
on the
leeway
first.
for sure.
I do, definitely. So yeah, and honestly, I still think, you know, regardless of where your journey takes you in life, there is something about that college experience that is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
I think for especially people who, you know, high school can be such a weird bubble, truly. You know, and I think you really start to grow into yourself. in those 4 years, I think you start to meet like-minded people, which I think is completely invaluable. Like I said, like I've met some of my best friends in those 4 years, because it's like, it's not that bubble anymore, and you're finally coming into your own skin, and you're finding the right people who are right there with you. And I think that is so important. So yes, I think pros and cons of college, right? Financial aid, not so great, but you know, those memories
Life
and those
experience.
people and life experience is just as amazing. And being broke for a couple years is actually kind of, you get to, not saying I'm like rolling in dough by any stretch of the imagination, but there's something fun looking back at it, and it's just like, wow, like I really lived off nothing. and, and it was probably some of the best times of my life. So yeah, college was great, and I'm glad I went. So did I answer your
Yeah.
question? I feel like I just ran in a circle, but that's fine.
No, you did. It's perfect. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay, great.
Yeah, college is, I feel like it's a time because it's the first time a lot of us leave the nest,
Yes.
and then you start to like see the world in a whole different way, and you get to make all
Hmm.
your choices for yourself, and there's kind of less
Yeah.
of an accountability factor, and you get to step more into who you truly are, and like you said, find people that you resonate with, that have similar
Exactly.
ideas and outlooks that might not be the same as your little group back home or bubble.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I guess what goes kind of hand in hand with like leaving that nest and whatnot, I think it's just, stepping out of any bubble in general. So I want to say, even though I was still in California, stepping out of my little LA bubble and going to San Francisco was really eye-opening for me. Just like I said, I mean, LA is very eclectic in its own right too, but you talk to anyone who's from California, northern and southern feel like very different places. And it was a good stepping stone, I think, into okay, Detroit, sure. Because at that point it's like, well, I conquered this, let's get out of the California bubble now and just kind of jump into a new city. So, it was great, and I highly recommend that for people leaving your hometown.
Yeah, you can always return, but I feel like you find the most out about yourself when you put yourself outside of your comfort zone.
1,000%, 1,000%. Did you go to school in Michigan,
I
or
did.
you
I
did?
went to school in Michigan. Yeah, like 2.5 hours. I went to Adrian College, which was about 2.5 hours from where I grew up. So it
Okay.
was like far enough that it
Yeah.
definitely, I mean, I feel like you could be almost next door and, well, not next door, but like the next city over, and it's like, it's gonna
Hmm.
be, as long as you're not going home for dinner, like
Yeah,
you're away.
exactly.
But I would imagine it would be even bigger of an experience if you're in a sight unseen, like completely just moved
Oh,
somewhere that you didn't even ever go
I know.
to. That's
I know. I
awesome.
never visited, never did anything. It was just kind of whatever was on the internet, right? At the time, it's like we didn't have Instagram or any of that, but it was like,
Right.
yeah, like all these movies are in San Francisco. What's the worst that could happen? I'm just gonna eat a bowl of clam chowder and sit by the Golden Gate Bridge and
There you go.
I don't know, hang out. So it was kind of, I do that often. Just kind of like, let's do it, jump up and
I
go.
I did that when I moved to Colorado, sight unseen.
Oh,
Got a job, moved there, and bawled my eyes out when I first got there. It's like, what did I just do? And then I never looked back. And it was the best, like one of the best experiences and decisions I ever made for myself. But it's
yeah, because
scary. Change is
it
scary.
is. Change is really scary. And I think I found that I actually thrive a lot more when I'm pushed up against the wall and it's like, oh my God, what did I do? But then I find that in turn, I kind of am my best self in those kind of scenarios, which has kind of been exciting to learn about myself. So I tend to do things that other people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And I just like don't even think twice about it anymore. So it's a skill, and I would say it's like a muscle, right? The more
Mm-hmm.
you do things that are out of your comfort zone and the more you do things that make you super uncomfortable, I think you just find a stronger sense of self. um so that's kind of, I guess, a good
Yeah,
takeaway. Everything's a muscle, right? So you just got to keep doing
totally.
it.
What's one of the most recent things you did that was really pushing into your discomfort,
Oh geez, this
or
story
whatever
goes my.
comes to mind?
Oh my gosh. So this, yeah. So this was pre-pandemic because it was at a bar. So
Hmm.
I say that because it's like I haven't really done anything lately that's out of my comfort zone. Like maybe like on an airplane, like taking my mask off to eat a cracker or something. Like living on the edge these days.
Right.
But this one always sticks out to me because it gives one of my best friends, Megan, anxiety when I told her the story. She was like sweating. Um, but so my I wouldn't say complaint, but moving to a new city and especially in your adulthood, I think if you don't work in huge offices with like-minded people, like in your 9 to 5 is just that, it's hard to kind of get out and meet people just in
Hmm.
general, right? And I would say that's the kind of the great things about these groups like Detroit Girl Squad and people who are just all kind of nervous to meet each other, but we're all feeling the same way, so we just end up like naturally all talking and hanging out anyways. But I remember saying like, gosh, like I kind of wish I had more Asian friends. As funny as that sounds, right? I was like, it would just be nice to know another like Filipina girl, or it'd be nice to just have that kind of Asian community of friends that I had a lot of back home, but that's something I was kind of missing here. And so there's this group. They still do a lot of things. It's called Over the Moon Detroit, and I saw that they were having an event at the that was Detroit City Distillery. I think that's the one in Eastern Market. Um, so it was for Chinese New Year. And so they were like, oh, we're going to have free food that's catered by so and so. We're going to have some people on a panel talking, some specialty drinks that, are made from Detroit City Distillery, things like that. So I was like, oh, like, this is a great event. Like, I really, really want to go. Could not find a single person to go with me. And my husband had a hockey game that night. So I was just like, I'm going to go by myself. So,
Yeah.
like, that I was really nervous, right? And I remember I got there so early and I was really early. I don't know why. I was just coming from work and I worked down the street. So I got there really early and I just remember sitting at the bar, right? And you're watching people come in, but they're coming in groups. So it's like groups of friends or, a trio of people. It was like, how do I talk to people at a bar and I don't know a single soul without looking desperate or sad or like, there's a lot of anxiety there. I think I'm like sweating a little just thinking about it. But there is a little bit of anxiety there. It's like, I don't know how to impart myself socially into these different groups and I feel very awkward. So I had a drink. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna kind of scope out the room. And I saw people sitting at tables together and stuff. And I was like, okay, Jamie, you just need to like get away from this bar because my back's turned towards people. So I downed another drink. I was like, okay, let's do it. Right. So I was like, next person who comes to the bar, Jamie, just talk to them and try to be friends with them. So there's a guy, and then I was like, oh God, I hope this guy doesn't think I'm hitting on him. But he comes up to the bar and he had a name tag, right? And I was just like, oh, like, were we supposed to get name tags? Right. And he goes, oh, they were up front. He was like, I'm sure you'll be fine. And I goes like, oh, like, what's your name? He goes, I was like, oh, James. I was like, oh, nice to meet you. I'm Jamie. Right. And I just remember we had this kind of natural conversation. And I was just like, are you here with friends? And he's like, yeah, that table over there is like all my friends. And I was like, perfect, because I nice enough, but how do I talk to them? Um, depression. I've never gone through depression. It took some time to really like sit there and realize like what's happening to you sucks, but it had to happen to you kind of move on to what I like to assume, better, onwards and upwards. So yeah, it's been a year, I guess. Kind of infrastructure. And I can actually now this as my home base. So it's kind of crazy how life works that way. And I think pandemic has, if anything, it's given us time. And what that means to anyone is so different, right? Whether it's time for family, whether it's time for friends, whether it's time to just sit and reflect, or time to work on your home, or, I think in a disguise and in some weird way, it was kind of this nice little step back for a lot of us. And I think for me personally, it was a lot of inflection, a lot of figuring out what I really wanted. And it was really kind of utilizing what was given to me. And I think that's really beautiful. And I'm so, in a weird way, grateful for it.
Yeah. I feel like it really made us, like you said, slow down and step back and reassess everything, like what we thought was solid and what always was going to be. We realized, oh, maybe not. Okay. So then what's actually important to me?
Yeah.
And if I have a dream, why not go for it?
Yeah, definitely. So, and I always say, I consider myself really lucky, in that regard. Because I know that it's, being quarantined has taken a different toll on, depends on who you are, but it's really taken its toll on people in different ways. And I'm just really grateful that I was able to turn it into a positive, and kind of just keep going. It's a day by day thing.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've also allowed yourself to feel it all throughout the process, which I think is important in being able to move on. You have to go through it. So like you said, when you lost your job, you were feeling depressed and crying in the middle of the night. Had you not allowed yourself to feel that, like you might still be stuck in that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I'm also a Pisces, so I like feel everything. I'm so sensitive. It's ridiculous. I still say that being sensitive makes me really good at my job because I can just like step into a place and be like, this doesn't feel right. But yeah, I think in being able to internalize and really understand what was happening. And, I'm not the one to brush anything under a rug, for sure. So facing all of those different aspects of what was happening was it, like I said, just, I think if anything, empowering. As soon as I kind of got my footing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think it took everybody a second because nobody knew, nobody knew what was happening or where it was going or what anything meant.
Yeah.
And it was changing every day. Like I don't know if I've really thought about it or processed it, but it was scary. It was scary. Like nobody knew. You really had no idea. And then you'd hear something one day and then it'd be a whole nother thing the next day. And it's like, oh, 2 weeks you're staying home. Oh, 2 months. Oh, forever. Like what?
Yeah, it is. And it's hard because then it's like, okay, like, what data is right? What data is wrong? What's skewing the data? Like, what's right? What is wrong? I don't know. Like masks, no masks, like, it's just like, it was this kind of constant, and it's hard because we couldn't get away from it because we were so like consumed in technology because there was really nothing else to do unless you were taking a walk or something. But I guess it was March here, so you weren't taking a walk, you were just in front of your screen. So, but it was just one of those things where it's like, it was all consuming. for a couple months there. And I think what felt like, okay, it's just going to be 2 weeks and we'll just be back to normal, is now like, oh wow, like this might be our reality for quite some time and we need to figure it out. So it's been an interesting one for sure.
So what's next for your business? What's your like dream right now?
What is my dream? Okay.
Yeah,
So
like if it turned into everything you could ever imagine in this moment, because that's going to change and evolve over time. But in this moment, what does that look like? I want to know.
My biggest dream has always been to be, and I told you this when we met, but I'm manifesting it every single day. But I always say I'm going to be the first Filipina on HGTV.
Yes.
It's going to happen. I got to make it happen. So here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing. During pandemic, I got this weird DM from some lady and she was like, oh, I saw your account. I'm looking for someone for a TV show thing, blah, blah, blah. Do you have a second to chat? And she was like a Cincinnati, not Cincinnati. She was some random number, but she was in LA based off of her Instagram. And she's a casting director. So I was like, okay, like whatever, fine, right? And I remember before I jumped on that call, I looked at my husband and I was like, pack your bags, you're going to LA. And he goes, just take the call. So I took the call and I was like sweating bullets. But she was a casting person for HGTV. I don't tell anyone the story because I'm really sad about it. But she was like, I came across your account and I really liked your stuff. And here's the thing, I don't have a lot of followers. I like, if you compare apples to apples with what is considered like Insta famous and what is just like your run of the mill, whatever, I'm pretty run of the mill. Like I just, it's not a big thing to me, it's numbers. But anyways, I was like, God, how did this lady find me? I guess I didn't ask her that. I should have. But she goes, we're looking for to pilot a new show. And she was like, basically, she's like, we're looking for a duo. She was like, do you work with anyone? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm kind of just started my business and I'm a one-woman show. I was like, I don't have anyone with me. Like I was like, it's just me. And she goes, oh, okay, no worries. She's basically told me that they were looking for the new Chip and Joanna is what she told me. Okay. And she's like, do you work with a contractor or someone like, you could just have that like synergy with? And I was like, no, like my business is very, very like truly, it still even is, but I was like, it's very preliminary. Like I don't have anything that anyone would want to come and film, like truly. I was like, give it a couple of years and maybe I'll call you back. But I was like, I'm just not there yet. She's like, no worries. She was like, I just, wanted to reach out and ask and all this other stuff. And I was just like, oh man. So but here's the thing, right? And I was talking to my friend about it because as soon as it happened, I was so devastated because I was so close. But you know what? I'm in that girl's phone.
You are?
She called me and the introduction was made and she saw something she liked, and that's before even talking or having met me. And I was like, you know what? Like maybe that's the tip of the iceberg. I was like, so I'm just gonna keep going. And I saved her number. My phone is HGTV. So if she does call back, HGTV will be calling me, or I'll be calling her. So I guess when it comes to manifestation, that was kind of the very first time I was like, whoa, like this is actually going to surmount to something. And I don't know what that means, but I was like, if that call was anything of an indication, then maybe I'm onto something great. So yeah, that was my fun little, not great, but not so great HGTV call, but we're going to get there. I promise you.
You are. It's already happening. It's already in the works. Like you already talked to HGTV. I love that. I had no idea. That's so exciting.
No one does. I remember I called my mom and told her, and she's like, well, like, doesn't Sheen do something? For my husband. That's my husband saying. And I was like, God, I wish. I remember I came up the stairs and I was like, dang it, why aren't you a contractor?
Can you build something, please?
Yeah, can you just like build something so we look like we're a duo and I can just get my TV show and then you can bounce. But
the people will love me and then you can leave.
Right. I know. I was gonna be like, I'm a Gemini, like my sun sign's a Gemini. That's kind of like two people, right? So that's a duo. I love it.
That's so exciting. And I'm so excited to watch the journey happen. Because I feel like in a few years you're gonna be back on my podcast, which is gonna be huge and everybody's gonna know about it by then.
Yes. Yes,
And we're
definitely
gonna be
will.
talking about this day that we manifested it.
I know, exactly. Just give it a couple years. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
So what does your show look like? Tell like let's just keep
Oh my
manifesting
gosh.
this.
We're gonna keep manifesting my HGTV show. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
just a little bit. I think so.
So I always thought it would be really cool. Like, so I guess if we're setting the scene, I thought it'd be really cool to, instead of having some like generic music, it'd be really cool to find people who like, just everyday people who make really cool beats or really cool music. So for transition music, it would be kind of cool to use someone's, you know, snippets and stuff. So people get like really cool exposure. I get really cool music. Like, I thought that, I always think that's such a, and I don't know what works with copywriting and all that other stuff, or maybe it's a budget thing, so they don't want to pay all these people. But I think in this day and age, exposure is really great just across the board. And I think there's a really, really good group of, not group, but I just think the music industry is just, there's so many people, talented, amazing people who just don't have a platform. So I always thought that would be kind of really cool to have that somewhere slipped in. Because HGTV music, like they don't have good music on there. I mean, it's just kind of generic snippets of stuff. And maybe that's
Yeah.
rhyme and reason, but for me, it'd be really cool to have like kind of different transition music into things. But I don't know. I guess I've never really like thought through how it would go. But I guess if I'm kind of aligning it with my business, it would be really nice to just show kind of, everyone loves the before and afters, but what I do is I show people how to do it themselves because it's all remote. All what I do is so remote. So to some degree, it might be kind of a cool little thing where I'm at home and they're in their house, and maybe it's the whole process, but cameras on me, cameras on them, and it's done remotely. That could be kind of fun and kind of a different flip on things. So you're not have to be there in person, but maybe the final walkthroughs in person or something like that. I don't know. I think what's really hard with HGTV also is like the budgets are so small, but technically if you're living in California, that's nothing.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be some kind of like, bridge there to where it like doesn't have to be $100,000 remodel or anything, maybe it could be a smaller scale, but really impactful.
I
I
like
think,
that.
yeah. And I think, I mean, cause that's kind of what I do, right? It's just, it's helping the everyday person with their home. I guess we didn't really talk about what I did.
No, I'm
I just
thinking that
realized.
now would be a really good time to talk about that.
People are like, oh, she's an interior designer. What does she do? What does she do? Okay, so here's my little like, I'm gonna just flip this one now.
Yes, no, please do.
Okay, so my blog has been called the Mid Coast Home, and it's always been that bridge between West Coast living or West Coast sensibility meets Midwest comfort is kind of how it's always been spun. So it's essentially very me. So the company is called the Mid Coast Studio, and I specialize in, or I'm gonna say we. So we specialize in e-design. So essentially it's all the bells and whistles of interior design, but all done remotely. So I have my own like kind of not spreadsheets, but different forms that I kind of forward to clients to show them how they measure their space, what kind of information I need. So it really walks and holds their hand through the process of getting me the information that I need. So they'll get scaled plans, they'll get renderings, they'll get all of those bells and whistles. But the nice thing is that they implement everything on their own time. So I'm not the interior designer for everyone, because I know some people want someone to do it for them 100% in and out. But for me, I bridge that gap between the person who doesn't mind buying the parts and pieces and putting it in themselves and kind of hiring someone to do the painting and stuff. Some people just need an idea, and some people just need to know what works, what fits, what functions. And so my process is made so that they are able to take these plans, take these renderings, have their Excel sheet of all the parts and pieces of what fits to scale, and they can implement it on their own time. So what makes that really nice is by doing so, it makes things a little bit more affordable for them, because they're not buying in like $50,000 worth of stuff. I mean, it never really is that much, but it's the idea that, okay, I'm going to buy this console, this paycheck, maybe I'll paint the wall over the weekend, and then like, oh, I just have to buy, this dining table, these chairs, whatever. I know this all fits in there, and then put it in. So it's kind of like a paint by numbers, but with interior design. But you're still obviously getting my time and me kind of walking you through it. What's really nice is, it's very casual. So it makes it very approachable. I love interior design so much, but I always felt like there's this air about it that feels a little bit uppity, I hate to say. And it is, because it is very, you have custom sofas with custom fabric, with custom whatever, and it's all one-offs, and it's a form of art, and I can appreciate that. But I hate the idea that interior design doesn't feel accessible to the everyday person. So it's always been my goal to really, I always think of my mom as my client, where she has the money and she kind of has the know-how, or she can lean on my sister for that stuff, but she's never going to walk into the design firm. Like, she just won't, but it's intimidating. And so I always say what I do is to just take on a project that could be so small, like helping them figure out the paint colors in their house, to projects of like, will this kitchen island fit in here, and what can go inside of it. So it's, my projects really span, and I offer payment plans, which I think is just another layer of making it a lot more affordable for the everyday person. But I really like to believe that I never want to be like that firm that, people just like, there's this air around it of like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is so beautiful. This is so expensive. It's more or less of like, I'm just a friend you call who happens to be an interior designer to kind of help you out, and I think that is, breaking that stigma and having people understand, obviously, my prices are cheaper than going to a firm. You are still paying, slightly, a little bit more, but in the long run, I always find that people always love it. At least that's kind of been the consensus. They love the process. And like I said, for someone who's a little more hands-on and wants to be a part of that process, this is a really great process for them with the studio. So I guess like that's kind of essentially what it is that I do. So yeah, and I never hide my pricing. I'm working on my website right now, but I have my design tiers, what you get in the tiers, and how much it is. So I think that transparency, especially in numbers, is really important as well. And I think that's something that obviously when you go to a high-end design firm, that's not really a thing until you get that invoice, give or take. But that's kind of how I like to lay it out, because I think for the everyday person, you want to know how much something is, period. So, that's kind of my demographic and my goal, I guess, with my end user.
Yeah, I love this idea. I'm not in the interior design world, but I've never heard of anything quite like this. And I think it's great that you're empowering people to create their space for themselves, but you're giving them the tools and like holding their hand along the way.
Yeah.
But they get to do it themselves. They get to create their space. And I think there's something really special about that.
Yeah, definitely. And I find that, that the photo I get when someone's like, oh my God, I did what you told me, like, that makes me so happy. That like warms my heart, and it makes me feel like, okay, like at least I'm ridding the world of ugliness. You know what I mean? Like, and it's and because, with pandemic and being quarantined, and now people are just remotely working, like, I think it's just part of the norm these days, is being in your space and having a beautiful space and loving the space you're in hasn't been, more important until now, I would say. So that's kind of been really, really rewarding.
So how did you come up with this idea?
So I will say I'm not first to market. There are some bigger companies out there that do what I'm doing. The only difference is, because I've looked into it, so like a couple of these other companies, there's different pricing tiers. It's really cheap. So I don't know how they pay their designers. Like, I want to say like it's like $16 for a base, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really strange. And I always say, like, what I'm doing, it helps people make it more accessible, but I never want to cheapen also the idea of interior design or make it feel like it could be commercialized that way. because I still think it's very much a bespoke process.
Hmm.
But I got the idea solely because, I knew other people were kind of doing it. I know some firms do offer it, and I wonder how they work. I don't know. I guess I wonder how they work, just because when you're doing something like in person and going to the showrooms and doing all other stuff, that is such an art in and of itself. So switching over to do what I'm doing, I feel like I'm taking a year or two to even figure that out. So like, you know what I mean? It's just a different infrastructure altogether. But I knew I wanted to do it this way because it gave me the flexibility to go back and forth between here and home. And I think the nice thing about doing it remotely, and getting those processes in stone, is that I can service anyone in the US. And I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway for me is if I'm not charging a lot though, like what is the flip side of that, is that I can really service anyone in the US.
Mm-hmm.
In the US, I say US. We haven't gone global yet.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. It's right after the HGTV show. That's kind of the lineup. But yeah, like that's kind of how it kind of came into fruition. And I knew it was a thing, but I didn't know what it meant to do remote design. But the more that I get into it, it's probably been a really good fit, I would say, for me. And like I said, it's been really, really rewarding. To not, I hate saying this, but like when you're working in a firm and people are paying those big prices, you're truly working for the top percentage of people, who make that kind of money. But like, helping people who are teachers, helping people who are just, your stay-at-home mom, and, just going into these people's homes who are just working Americans, I think is just amazing. And I keep saying amazing, but it really is. It's a great feeling. I feel fulfilled. I guess that's a great way to put it. I feel very fulfilled doing it this way. So, and sometimes if someone's just like, oh, it's a lot, I can't afford it, I'll try to break down the payment plans to where it is. I'm very flexible that way, where it's like, you really want this, I'm happy to do this for you. I can accomplish doing this at a lower price. It's not going to be like, all the bells and whistles, but it'll be just enough to, I think, accomplish what you're doing. So I think that's another thing too, is, I'm working with everyday people. So I feel like being able to be a little bit more flexible and to help get them what they need, in a way that is feasible is kind of, the gist of it. And so I think that's really what's been keeping the business kind of going. It's not like I'm crazy, crazy busy all the time, but to have that trickle of people constantly, just waiting for the flood.
It's coming, babe. It's coming. Remember you said this, because there's going to be a day where you're like, it's so much. And then you start hiring employees. It's cool.
Yeah, no,
Build
exactly.
the business.
Exactly. So I was just like, okay, well, little by little. And, was it Rome wasn't built in a day. So patience.
So true. And I think there's something like that's nice about things kind of starting slow and building. It feels a little bit more authentic, and you get to figure out your process as it's happening versus like everything dumping on you right at once. And you're like, but I'm still figuring it out, and now I have all this other stuff to worry about.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that, I would say pandemic has taught me, is to step back once in a while, because I am currently where I wish I was a year ago. And that's a powerful thing, where it's like, okay, I have a couple clients under my belt. Cool. That's all I wanted in the first couple months. Okay, now I have clients and I have new clients, and now I'm working on a website. Okay, cool. Like that's where I wanted to be, in the next 6 months. Like, and I think those baby steps are what surmount to the overarching picture. And I think if you don't step back to really take that in and be grateful, then I think that's when things kind of get a little bit out of your reach. Because I think one day, when I've been like really into below deck lately, but when I'm chartering a yacht for my family as a thank you for supporting me, that'll feel really good, because it's like, okay, like I'm not here by mistake or happenstance. I'm here because I worked really hard, and I, checked off the boxes, with those little baby steps. Because that's really, when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to really weave through it. So I'm trying to just take everything day by day and, be excited. It's nice to open my computer and be excited about what I'm doing. And that's, for me, that's everything. So yeah, so it's an important takeaway to really just absorb, and I guess we're all doing the best we can.
I really like you talking about like one step at a time, and just taking those little steps. And it can even be something so tiny as like sending one email. But if we are doing that every day or multiple days a week, over the course of a year, a lot has been accomplished. Like we don't see that in the moment when it's like, all I did today was send one email. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like you're saying, like look back and see how far you've come, because you've come ways. A lot of times we get stuck in the moment and where we want to be, but we're not, we fail to appreciate how far we've come and what we actually have in
Mm-hmm.
that moment.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I will say if there's anything I'm really good at, is it's always been that and not realizing it. But I have journaled since I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So I actually, when I was home last trip, I took home, I've been taking back some of my stuff from my childhood bedroom, and it's like I had composition books, I have letters, I mean, even love letters. I've kept like all these love letters and stuff. I have a box of them and I brought them home, and I told my husband, I was like, we should just open wine and read them. But like, I've always been really good at documenting how I felt in moments, how things made me feel. And like I said, very much a Pisces. But I did find one letter and I keep it very close to me. And it's actually in my nightstand. But it was like, I was like in econ class in high school, and it was right before graduation. And it was me writing down all my fears about life. And then it was me then becoming my own hype woman. We're like, you know what, Jamie, you're brave. You can do this, like all this other stuff. And like, that's so cool, because then I turned 30 and I was just like, I'm going to write myself another letter. And so that's
Mm,
exactly what I did. So now I have like every 10 years, I'm going to just write myself a letter. But it's like you said, it's taking it all in. It's those little things, because time flies. Time just doesn't care. It does not
mm,
care.
mm.
So I think, that is one thing I've been really good at, is always documenting like prolific moments in my life, and the mundane, because I think the mundane is just as impactful.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly suggest that to anyone. Just stop and write yourself a letter,
Do you
and then look
reread
back.
it often, or do you like put it away for a
Um,
while and
I
then?
put it away for a while and I wait till I find it, just stumble
Mm-hmm.
upon it as I'm digging through stuff, or if I really need to hear it from myself.
That's beautiful. Yeah, to have that encouragement from
Mm-hmm.
yourself, because you always have yourself. Like no matter
Yes.
what's going on, everybody else, everything else could fade away, but to have that encouragement for yourself that you wrote in a time where you felt good, and
Mm-hmm.
then when you're in that low spot, to be able to read it and be like, oh yeah, yeah, okay, that's who I
Yeah,
am. I
exactly.
love this. I'm
Exactly.
going to do this.
You should. And I highly suggest, and even like, it's like when people make their goals for the year, for like, before the end of the year, it's like, I'm gonna make my goals. I think it's even better to write yourself a letter. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I'm at in my life, this is what I'm hoping for myself. And then maybe in the following year, when you write your goals again, it's like you open up that letter and see what you have or haven't accomplished. And I always look at it as like less of a I haven't accomplished this. It's more or less like my life shifted, and this
Yeah.
is actually what I ended up accomplishing.
Mm-hmm. And your goals might have changed by then because of a shift.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's life. And I always think, what's really cool is like if I have kids one day, it's like for them to open up a letter that I wrote to myself at their age. Like,
Mm.
I think that's kind of a fun little loop. Um,
I feel
circle
like you could
again.
make a book
I
of like
probably
these little
could.
notes to sell.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? I have so much, and I didn't realize how much I knew I wrote a lot, but until I kind of like was unearthing all these things from like the back of my closet, it was like a whole folder of poetry, all these composition books just filled with random writings. I found one that was hilarious. It was like, I think people grow up when they're 19 or 20, because I think they're in college, and it was like my 12-year-old self writing like, I'm pretty sure you're an adult at 20 years old. And I'm sitting here at like 31, like, little do you know. you never
So
grow up.
wrong.
Yeah. You actually never grow up. So that's actually the secret.
Totally. Never grow up.
You
Keep
never grow
that
up.
childlike wonder.
Yes, it's a
Well, this
wonderful
has
thing. Keep
been such
dreaming.
a pleasure.
Good. This has been fun. It's been great. I know I keep talking and talking and talking. So just
No,
edit out
I love
everything.
it. I love it. I mean, we could talk all night, but
Yes.
there's time for that another day. I
Yes.
do have a few questions though I'd like to ask that I
Oh,
ask
okay.
everybody at the end.
Okay.
So, first one, if you could tell everybody in the world one thing, what would it be?
Oh, it's hard. I have like two,
You
but
can
I'll
say
give
two.
you,
There's no rules.
can I? Okay. So my first one would be to give yourself a little more grace. Someone told me that maybe about a couple months ago, actually, because I was kind of rambling off a list of what I had to do, what I haven't accomplished, why I'm upset I haven't done it. And they're like, you need to give yourself more grace. And ever since I've been told that, I do. And it's been life changing. I think we'd all be a little bit better people if we weren't so hard on ourselves.
Mm.
And I think that rings true because we're just so inundated with like social media, right? It's like, I'm not skinny enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not accomplished enough, I don't have this, I don't have that. When we forget that it's like, step back, give yourself some grace, and it's all going to be okay. I think we just, what is it? Comparison is a thief of joy, also. So
Yes.
giving yourself that grace and understanding, like, this is me, this is who I am, and just that self love is so, so important. I guess my second one, because there are no rules here, if I were to tell everyone, is jump in head first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Because if there's one thing I'm really proud of in my life, is that I have no regrets.
Mm. That's
And
rare.
it is. And I look at, and I mean, I feel there's one regret, but it's like very small, and it was just something dumb. It was in high school. It was in high school. It's nothing crazy, not even worth mentioning. But I think that has been the most powerful thing for me, and what has kept me going is like, okay, well, I've gotten this far. You know, what is there to lose? I fail, and then what? I learn.
Yeah.
So that's one other thing. I think the world would be a much cooler place if people just kind of let their guard down and jumped right into like passion
Yes.
projects.
Yes.
Passion projects are what make the world go round. And I think that people are very powerful, and they forget that they have that power. So jumping in head first, do it.
Yes. 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 What is your current life motto or mantra?
Oh geez. Be the CEO your parents wish you married. That's not a life mantra, but that is one I keep in the back of my head.
I like it.
I don't know. I guess the first one kind of answers that too, right? It's always been, I don't want to say balls to the wall is the takeaway here, but truly, truly, I think, just not being afraid of making mistakes, because there's no such thing. If you just rid your mindset of making mistakes as a thing, then you kind of just unlock the secret to life at that point. I've always kind of been flying by the seat of my pants. So I would say that's kind of my life mantra in general, is just diving in head first. So that's the secret, guys. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm still going through it. I'm going through the notions of everything. So don't. Yeah, it's one big educated guess. I guess that's the best. Like, err on the side of caution, but just
Go for it.
Go for it. Yeah.
So, final thing, I'm sure people
Okay.
want to contact you. If people want to work with you or contact you personally,
Yeah.
how do they do that?
Okay. So on Instagram, I am under Jamie.Pecina. So Jamie spelled J-A-M as in Mary, I-E, Pecina, which is P as in Paul, E-C-I-N-A. And it's the Mid Coast home, which should pop up. And you can basically, that's how you can mainly contact me, because all of my, you can DM me, you can email me on there. But I would say that's kind of the main avenue of contacting me. I mean, I'd give out my phone number, but I
Yeah,
won't.
maybe once you had had a
Yeah,
screening.
make the connection, and then we can exchange numbers. But I know I have a 310 number, and it's very rare now because they ran out of 310 numbers. That's an original Los Angeles number, and I think it's 424 now. So like, I am married to my phone number, and I refuse to ever, ever, ever change it.
Never gonna give that one up.
Never gonna give that one up.
So you got to be careful who you give it out to.
Exactly. But yeah, that's how that you can best contact me.
Okay, Midcoast Home. And your website's coming soon. I'm sure they'll be able to find that through your Instagram as well.
Yes. And once you get on the blog and stuff, there is kind of like the studio, and you can click on that, and that's kind of where the website will be linked to, but it'll be on my bio once it's kind of up and running. But I'm very excited about it because building a website's no joke. So thankfully I have good help.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And until next time.